Welcome back to Rappahannock Issues. I'm Tom Coen. I'm joined here with Jim Wiggins, talking about cybersecurity, cyber terrorism, cyber warfare. We're here at the Stafford Regional Airport, and just to let people know, this topic is so important that the federal government has dedicated a month for it, and then said that October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And so it's a good area to sort of start with talking about national aspects, because we hear this in the news about the various groups going after national interests and information and et cetera. So on a national level, how big is this of an issue?
Well, the government's been struggling with it for quite some time, and it's huge, right? And one of the issues that, whether it's a civilian agency or a state and local or even in the Defense Department, they continue to be challenged with how they're protecting their information. Information has become just so important. I mean, think about all the things that we rely upon, whether it's a service from the government in terms of a retirement check, or whether it happens to be some benefit or whatever, right? And so the internet as we know it today has become really kind of a national asset for all intents and purposes. It runs not only the government, or the government uses it to run its operations, but as do all of these other businesses that are out there. And so what I like to think of or try to emphasize is the fact that our economy, for all intents and purposes, is out there on the internet. So it's this national economy that needs to be properly protected. So the government obviously sees this challenge, and so they try to do things to basically try to address the risks that it faces and try to protect it.
Now, and is this just terrorist groups versus a country, or is this a way that you have nation versus nation? Because there's always been spying with nations, but so is this sort of a way nations are trying to do that as well?
Yeah, you've actually got probably four kind of key actors involved in this. You've got national organizations or national governments that do actually target other nations, right? You've got organized crime. That's another area, so rather than the traditional crime syndicates, trying to squeeze money out of the local business, now they basically turn their attention to the internet because there's a lot of money to be made in terms of stealing identities and selling them. You've got traditional terrorist organizations and groups that are out there as well. And then you've even got what we think of as the lone wolf, the individual who's got a specific agenda or a specific grievance that he or she wants to basically pursue. And so, you've got it's a little bit more nuanced than that, but those four kind of major actors that are out there. And each of them will have different motivators. Sometimes those motivators are economic, sometimes they're revenge, sometimes they're spying, sometimes they're trying to pursue some type of agenda, some type of terrorist agenda. So unfortunately, it's not a one-size-fits-all, which means that for the government and for that national asset out there, it's really challenging because we've got all these adversaries that are coming at us with different objectives as to why they're basically trying to attack, right? Some of them are trying to steal money, some of them are trying to shut down services to cause fear, some of them are spying, or stealing intellectual property. So unfortunately, it's not a one and done. It's a pretty complex issue.
And you brought up the lone wolf aspect, and I guess we all sort of understand the difficulty with dealing with lone wolves with traditional terror.
Yep.
But for this, all you really would need is just somebody sitting at their computer who's bored. I mean, people are old enough to remember War Games or other movies where you just have a geek in front of a computer that's just like, hey, I want to do this type thing. And that's even harder to deal with.
Exactly. And you've seen high-profile examples of that in terms of information sharing, like through Snowden and even Bradley Manning, who, you could kind of lump them in as a lone wolf. They decided on their own to basically take information that they shouldn't have and shared it and caused quite a bit of an impact, negative impact to the government. But you're right. That's one of the big challenges today is how do we identify those lone wolves that are out there that are in their what I'll call mother's basement or whatever, and with the technology that's available today, there's a lot of what we call point-and-click attack tools where people don't have to have a lot of super sophisticated knowledge in this particular space. They can download certain types of tools And just because they've got so many targets out there on the internet, if they can't, if a particular system happens to be properly secured, they can simply point themselves to another at another venue.
So what do countries do to sort of defend themselves against all this barrage of attacks?
Yeah.
Go against
So I mean, a lot of times, whether it's the U.S. government or any other governments out there, they'll sometimes set up their own what we call offensive security teams, and we call them red teams, and those red teams will oftentimes try to penetrate the actual information systems of their respective organizations to try to beat the bad guys. In other words, find the issues before the bad guys do.
Right. And are there any failings or difficulties with these type of defenses?
Well, I think the biggest challenge we run into is that the footprint of IT and society is so large that it becomes very difficult. We have to be right 100% of the time. The adversaries only have to be right one time, and that makes it a really big challenge for us. And then when you start to look at just how many endpoints there are, how many points of connection we have in terms of laptops and tablet devices and smartphones, and now with the Internet of Things starting to appear as well, which is now you have all of these individual sensors that are going to be connected. It's a really big challenge for us.
And you mentioned in the last segment about the anonymous group going against ISIS, which I don't think many people have sort of thought of, one terrorist group attacking the other terrorist group.
Yeah, so I think Anonymous would probably take issue with calling them a terrorist group. That's not to say that they're not, but they're basically a group of anonymous hackers that have kind of coalesced around an ideology of trying to impart certain, justice, if you will, when they see wrongdoings being done. And so when you see organizations like ISIS or Al Qaeda, do things that they don't agree of, whether it's a physical bombing or some kind of, they oftentimes we've seen cases where they've actually targeted that group and tried to really shut down their online presence to try to prevent the propagation of information by those respective terrorist cells and groups. Right.
And we don't want you to shut down your expression of getting information. So come back after this break as we look at the use of cyber attacks against the individual. So come back after our break.